Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Levy. I'm a trustee of the BEARR Trust, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you here to our annual conference on the theme War in Ukraine, the Civil Society Response. The inspiration for this event has been, of course, the war in Ukraine, which we've learned about not only through contact with family and friends and news reports, but also through our long-standing partnerships with civil society organizations working in the areas of health and social welfare in Ukraine and Moldova. Those partnerships have been further strengthened by our Ukraine emergency appeal. That was launched at the end of February, and since then, the BEARR Trust has raised over £400,000, of which 3/4 has already been sent in the form of 130 grants to over 60 civil society organizations in Ukraine and Moldova. And as a result of that, we have seen a rapid acceleration in the development of those civil society organizations as they have faced the challenges of war. They are often small local groups supported by large numbers of volunteers. And we wanted to create a platform from which they can speak directly about their experience, what that experience has taught them, and how they see their role in the near to medium future, by which we mean this winter and beyond. They can also tell us what role they believe international NGOs can play in support of their work over the coming months. The format of our conference is 2 moderated panels. We have 7 panelists. 6 of them come from organizations committed to bringing humanitarian relief to vulnerable people. One of our panelists, equally committed, brings a wider context as an advisor to President Zelensky, and each of the panelists will be introduced to you as we go through the conference. But between them, they contribute a wealth of experience to our discussion today. This is the BEARR Trust's first hybrid event, and it's wonderful to see so many of you here, both in person and online. And I just want to take a moment to thank all the people who've helped make this possible. All my co-trustees, Michael Rasell and Janet Gunn will moderate our 2 panels, but everybody has helped, and also our volunteer, Nathan Dampier. Alexia Claydon, the BEARR Trust Information Officer, who many of you will have had some communication with, has worked tirelessly, perhaps tiredly would be a better expression, but tirelessly, to make this happen. Anna Lukanina, is a close friend and supporter of BEARR. I want to thank also our interpreters today, Lisa Snegireva and Alexander Stetsenko, who will be translating from and to English and Russian and Ukrainian. I also owe a debt of thanks to Masha Chernitska of Mosty Movi, who's helped with our translations. And finally, Meera Jobanputra of Voluntary Action Islington and her colleagues, who have provided us with excellent facilities, including the OWL. I'm now going to hand over to Alexia, who's going to explain all the things you need to know to make the technology work perfectly.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So as Marcia mentioned, we have 2 interpreters, Lisa and Alexander. Lisa will be providing simultaneous interpretation between English and Russian, and Alexander will be providing interpretation between English and Ukrainian. If you would like to listen to the conference in English, please click the globe button at the bottom of your screens and select the English channel. If you would like to listen in Ukrainian, please do the same. And if you can understand all 3 languages, that's English, Ukrainian, and Russian, you can listen to the original audio throughout without the need for interpretation. Michael has just copied these instructions into the Zoom chat for me, for all of you. But if you have any issues, please just send me a message on the Zoom chat throughout and I'll see what I can do. Just to let you know, some of our speakers are, including our interpreters, are joining from Ukraine. There's a possibility that some of them might be hit by blackouts. I know they all have their generators and power banks with them, but so they might have to rejoin the meeting. So please be patient while we readmit them. And finally, you should have all received a conference reading pack. If you haven't, I'll also post the links into the chat. This will give you background information on our speakers, their work, and their organisations and all that they've been doing for the last 9 months. And I'll pass over to Michael now. Thank you. Oh, the owl. Oh, for people, sorry, for people who were here at VAI, our 360 owl camera and microphone can pick up noise. So please do be as quiet as possible throughout. Thank you.
Over to you, Michael.
Dear colleagues, online and in London, it's a great pleasure to chair this first panel, looking at lessons learned from volunteer and civil society organisations working over the last 9 months during this terrible war in Ukraine. My name is Michael Rasell. I'm a trustee of the BEARR Trust and also an academic at the University of Innsbruck. We have 3 fantastic panelists for you today. The format is that each panelist will talk for about 5 minutes, an open conversation about their experiences, after which I'll moderate a short discussion between the 3 panelists trying to share experiences, and then we'll open up to questions in the room and also online. For those of you online, we would be grateful if you would type the questions into the chat. For those of you in the room in London, Alexia and Marcia will help me to field questions and moderate. So our 3 panelists represent real grassroots organizations working in different parts and across the Ukraine. Olga Donets from Donetsk Youth Debate Centre is going to be talking to you near Kyiv. Olga was originally working in Donbass and based in Donetsk before having to move to the Kyiv region after Russia's invasion of Donbass in 2014. Marat Abdullayev is talking to us from Ukraine, yes, but from Odessa in Ukraine, so in the south. He represents the organization, the Youth Charitable Foundation Next. And coming to us from Moldova, so now a country that's received proportionally a very high number of refugees from Ukraine, we have Tamara Ababii, who's representing the League of Polish Women in Moldova. So these are, as we're going to learn, these are all organizations that have rapidly changed the nature of the work they do, the groups of people with which they work, their connections to other civil society organizations and to local authorities. And we're really interested in trying to pull together this very important and valuable experience in the hope that whilst these tragic events continue, there's some potential for sharing the knowledge and sharing this expertise and experience that's been gathered. So can I hand over straight to you, Olga, please? Just to say, if anything with the technology or the interpretation is still unclear, please just write in the chat and either myself or Alexia will field the questions there for you. So you should just be able to find the button at the bottom of Zoom called interpretation and click into the language that you prefer. After that, you shouldn't need to do anything else. It will stay in that language. There is sometimes a little delay on Zoom as the interpreters switch on and off. Olga and Marat, I think, will be speaking in Ukrainian, and Tamara will be speaking in Russian. If you like to listen to the original, you can switch into original full stop if you want multiple languages, or move between languages. So, Olga, please, 5 minutes for your reflections on how the Youth Debate Centre has been working in the last 9 months.
Good afternoon. everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to attend this conference. And it's really gratifying to see that so many people want to know what is going on in Ukraine, that there are so many people who would like to know how Ukrainians live and in what conditions they live during the war. Myself, like most Ukrainians, woke up on the 24th of February to the sounds of bombs exploding. It was very scary, very loud, and we decided to evacuate fast to leave Kyiv Oblast. And on the second day, we were already in the city of Lviv, and we understood that people who work in the areas of NGOs who deal with civil society, they are under big threat in case our territory is occupied by Russians. That's why we decided to move, and for the next several months we stayed in Lviv. For the first 3 days or so, we were in the state of shock, and emotionally it was very difficult to figure out what we're supposed to do. But then shortly afterwards, I got a note from a colleague from BEARR Trust, from Anna, and the message actually was about their readiness to help us. And we started receiving this kind of letters on a daily basis, but we were at such a loss that we couldn't figure out how to go about it. And over the last 20 years, we've been working with civil society, and we have a ramified network of partners all across Ukraine. So we started asking around what people needed, what kind of assistance they would like to have, and so on. We primarily spoke about people in the hotspots, as we call them, in the areas which were already under occupation. So we started dealing with very uncustomary things. And we started dealing with issues like evacuation assistance, with medicines and clothing, all the bare necessities, as it were. For a month, the situation was one of confusion. We were asking people around, and we helped people to evacuate from the endangered areas, and we primarily focused on helping people to save their lives. The next step was about assisting the regions and oblasts which hosted IDPs on a temporary basis. So we started providing them with humanitarian assistance, primarily distributing clothing, food, and medicines in the camps where they concentrated. So that was the first stage, the first response to humanitarian catastrophe which ensued. We had quite a lot of experience because previously we had worked a lot with social assistance. So we thought, how could we use our experience and expertise to put it to good use and to make our assistance as efficient as possible? So we decided to set up mobile youth groups, teams, people who started working with IDPs in shelters, in temporary camps. They talked to children, to young people, to the elderly. They asked them about what they needed most. Very straightforward, basic things, but we couldn't even imagine what the impact will be. But that assistance was so crucial for them. And those young people basically undertook part of the functions of the local authorities to help the IDPs to adapt to new environment, new conditions. So basically, they help people to alleviate their shock and their stress, as it were. They were introducing these people to the host communities. Those were just the first steps. Then we started helping people to get employed. So those young people were a tremendous help. And we did that simultaneously in 5 regions of Ukraine, which hosted the largest number of IDPs. That was a huge chunk of work, and we are very proud of that. But then we started thinking about awareness campaign, that we have to make our voice heard about that. And we started going back to our customary projects. We understand that going back to normal daily life, people have to go about doing what they are accustomed to do, going to kindergartens, going to schools, talking to people, socializing, connecting with people, and so on. So we started coming back to classical youth work and to working with children, to educational activities, working with school teachers, trying to make our voice as loud as possible to raise awareness of the problem of those people, not just in Ukraine, but also beyond. We are making videos about these people, about their problems, about the challenges they're facing, and we try to disseminate those stories beyond Ukraine so that people abroad would be aware of what is going on here. And it's very gratifying that the European communities are very helpful, and they are aware of what's going on in Ukraine.
Olga, thank you so much. I'm really sorry to have to break such a valuable learning, and I think how you explain the transition in the work across the period has been fascinating. But we'll have lots of opportunity for conversation after colleagues. We'll go straight now to Marat Abdullayev to hear about the lessons that you think you've learned and your organization has learned in responding to the war.
I am very grateful to you for having organized this event. The first shock has been overcome, and I'd like to, first of all, thank our military and all the civilized world for helping us. The whole world is standing by Ukraine, and they help us to fight on all the fronts of this war. I'd like to explain what is straightforward and understandable to each and every Ukrainian. We're all fighting, each and everyone on his or her place. Just imagine that on 2/3 of the territory of the UK, there would be no safe place. And it would be dangerous for everyone, for the elderly, for children. They can never be sure that they will wake up alive. The 24th of February split our lives into two parts, before and after. You would be aware of what was going on in Mariupol and in other cities hit by Russia. We have requests even for basic necessities from children and IDPs on a daily basis. People go hungry. They lack very basic necessities. Our success is possible just because we rally together. Like mothers from Mykolaiv are very grateful to BEARR Trust, who helped them a lot. Or the military are very grateful to NGOs for providing them with the Canadian-made tourniquets. So the assistances are really varied. You provide people with help, with money, but above all, with hope. And we are very hopeful that we shall prevail, and we hope that our civilization will emerge victorious. We are very thankful to you for this assistance. We will fight to the very end, and we're very hopeful that we will triumph. The mission of humanitarian organizations is what is most needed by Ukrainians now. In our projects, we focused on psychological, psychiatric support for people, and on basic necessities for the people. Because sometimes people lack very basic things like food or medicines. And in the Donbass, for instance, there are areas where people have no electricity for several days in a row, and young mothers cannot even cook food for their babies. We need to create and set up emergency reserves for those who require this assistance most. People should know where to go to if they lack the most needed resources. We should be ready to help our people in these difficult times. We need to have emergency reserves for crisis times, including food products and medication above all. This will help our beneficiaries to survive, and we should also provide them with additional sources of electric power, because this is really crucial, especially during the winter time. Lighting of and housing is really crucial, because during the winter time, 2 or 3 days without electricity can really be lethal, and we need to focus on the problems of those who are on the verge of survival now. We keep receiving requests for humanitarian assistance. Sometimes people resort to humanitarian assistance because they have no chance of employment. So we have to help them with jobs as well. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive, because instead of looking for jobs, they will have to queue up for very basic necessities. So we have to focus primarily on families with young children and those who are unemployed. We need to focus on the issues of social management, which will help people to get proper training and with a view of future employment. We need to focus on the social adaptation and resettlement. And we do hope that if we work together, we will be able to garner enough resources for this. Educated and properly trained people also can be considered a combat resource, which will help us emerge victorious. So we are very helpful to everyone who is helping Ukraine.
Marat, thank you very much for this very important and call both for support and explanation of the different activities that your organization's been involved in. We'll now go to hear from Tamara Ababii in Moldova, so a country receiving a lot of refugees and working with relief efforts and hosting efforts there. So also give you 5 minutes, Tamara.
Well, thank you. I would like to join the gratitude words and appreciation words from our organization to you, because your fund indeed turned out to be the most lively, the most dynamic, the most emotional. I'm not comparing the situation in Moldova to that in Ukraine, but when it all started, when it all happened, people were experiencing some very quiet panic. People were just driving, taking their car to drive and assist people, assist refugees. Sorry, we call them refugees, but I mean Ukrainian citizens from the borderline. And people were driving just there without any knowledge whether they will meet somebody. They were trying to escape from this terrible situation, from this terrible disaster. There were lots of efforts in vain in the first days. The authorities were very cumbersome. They didn't assist in the very beginning a lot. They didn't assist much. And they didn't assist any regulation. They didn't do any efforts. So the ordinary people, the NGOs, have taken the first blow onto them. We were doing everything possible with our partners. We decided to collect warm clothes, blankets, pillows. And, you know, we were desperate. We were in huge despair because we wanted to assist people, but we couldn't think what we can be assisting with because it was all much too sudden and all much too bulky. And so when we decided to spread the information, spread the knowledge that we can assist, it all became much easier. But at the same time, we managed to collect funds to assist refugees. And then we all understood that we cannot feed everyone. Therefore, we called for the volunteers. These were people who were assisting us with psychological support, because very often there were people who come and tell you something and then they started to cry, because sometimes volunteers were just rising in the middle of the night to assist with delivery of food or anything. So there were all these volunteers who were assisting. Even in the very first days, everybody thought that it would be a very brief situation, a week or a fortnight, maybe a month. But our organization was very fast to understand that it will be a longer situation, that this is a marathon, that this is a long-term situation. So we called on volunteers and their support, and with our partner organizations who were extending psychological support, we had the volunteer to volunteer program, because this assisted some of the Ukrainian psychologists to find a job. I'm sure that this is the case because certain ladies on my recommendation have become the psychologists in the center in the shelters for temporary displaced persons. If we speak about assistance, this is psychological and other support. This is what we did. Maybe I will give you more details some other time. It was earmarked and targeted assistance to families who were found in a pitiful situation, mostly families with small children. And there is a special family, a unique case. The woman was born in Moldova but lived in Ukraine for all of her life. And she came back to the village, and it turned out that there are 8 kids for whom she has to take care of, because some are fostered children, some are adopted. So she was doing everything to feed them, to give them shelter, to give them warmth. When summer arrived, we thought that it is worthwhile to assist not only kids, but adults as well, and try to estrange from this terrible news. So we assisted them to go to a picnic, to some tourist attractions. We tried to ensure some normal, ordinary life conditions so that they would feel that ordinary life still continues. So they would feel the taste of the ordinary life. And they were very grateful because we have distracted from all this bad news, at least for some times. Our special pride, my pride goes to the project within which we have started the courses for Ukrainian accountants to find their job opportunities in Moldova. So 9 people came to the courses, 6 graduated, and 2 persons found job stations in Moldova. So they're working as accountants in Moldova now. and this is our support fund who assisted them in doing so. Getting back to what Marat said, one of the lessons learned is as follows. We all wanted to give people this rod to teach them how to fish, not to give them the fish, but train them how to do fishing. So maybe that's all in a nutshell. I can just briefly tell you in some bullet points as regards our future plans. We would
Tamara, sorry, the future plans idea is a great one, but we'll come to that a little bit later. I just want to allow conversation, allow time for discussion. And so we've heard, and I apologize to the speakers in particular, but also to the audience that we have very limited time, but we have received very rich information about how organizations needed to rapidly change. And I'd just like to hear a little bit from each of you, looking back at it in terms of changing the activities that were offered. I know, Marat, you talked a lot about offering psychological help. Olga, you traced how your organization kind of actually had to change its activities every few months in response to where you were working. And Tamara, obviously, a completely unexpected influx of people. In just a few sentences, how would you say what helped your organization to change? What would be the lesson that you suggest for being flexible, for being able to respond quickly?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that what helped us most of all is the understanding, but there's no other way out for us but to carry on working and to try and analyze new needs, new challenges, and to adapt to them. What also helped us a lot is that the people working in my team all stayed put in our city, and they started working right away. They didn't leave the city. We connected with other volunteers, and they were very responsive. Everyone focused on their respective areas of work and proceeded on the basis of understanding how important our work is.
Olga, can we go to you about what helped your organization to be able to change quickly?
Well, first of all, I would like to subscribe to what Marat said. We had no other way to go. We remained in Ukraine, and we understood that we have to change because the situation changed. And if we want to remain relevant, we want to adapt our work to the arising challenges. Civil society works in order to overcome the challenges that ordinary people encounter. So that's very straightforward. So as a matter of fact, we basically, with time, we got accustomed to working during the air raids and so on. And our main conclusion was, don't be afraid, carry on, and be flexible. And what also made our work efficient is that we kept asking people for their feedback, what they needed most, because it's really crucial that we follow in the wake of people's requirements. We didn't have any statistics, any relevant databases. We just saw that the humanitarian crisis is huge, and we needed to get people's feedback and to act accordingly. Our team was very helpful. We helped more than 4,000 people, but the staff, the permanent staff of our organization is 3 to 4 people who work full time. And we managed to help that many people just because we had a huge network of trainers, volunteers, and people who wanted to help. They all worked free of charge on a voluntary basis, and that was very helpful. So obviously, just because our team was so committed and dedicated to it, we managed to adapt to what we had to do. And now we see our way very clear, and we have no fear at all.
That's a very strong and brave position to take. Thank you, Olga and Murat. Tamara, how was it for you? We've heard many themes that I think will resonate, but it would be great to hear how your organization worked to change.
It resonated with me with the standpoint. You are there in the situation, no matter whether you want it or don't want it. We in Moldova thought it was really bad manners if you're not assisting Ukrainians. This is one thing. And secondly, we did understand that we need to be proactive in the most urgent way. While you're thinking whether this activity is worthwhile or not worthwhile undertaken, then it loses any sense. For example, when we were moving people from the border, while we were discussing that with the accountants, etc., the need was gone already. And there are two things perhaps that I will pinpoint. This is first, proactive feedback and calculating one's own sources and forces so that you are indeed helpful.
Wonderful. All of you have mentioned this this question of asking people for feedback, asking people for guidance on what they need and how it should be delivered. Could you talk a little bit more about how this happens? Because I think this is superbly relevant also for organizations that want to support from abroad, to know actually what are the needs and not just assume that they are particular needs. Could you talk a little bit about, for each of you, how did you get information? What was the most effective way of getting information, while keeping in mind that the context and the situation was changing? But it would be fantastic to hear about this feedback from people. Let's start. Murat, would you like to start?
Can you hear me? Well, first of all, I'd like to say that the residents of Odessa are very much aware of the work of our organization. So they addressed us very frequently. They contacted us via Facebook. Primarily, we were contacted by IDPs. We tried to work with all of them comprehensively and to screen them thoroughly in order to better understand what kind of challenges and requirements each and every one of them had. And we also share the information that we get from our beneficiaries. We share this information with other civil society organizations. We constantly keep in touch with our beneficiaries and try to remain in contact and to follow their needs, be it in terms of psychological support, moral support, or otherwise. So it's really important to have a channel of communication with these people so that they could use this channel as we go along, because they may encounter some new challenges. And if we are aware of this and there is a contact between us, we are really able to respond to that quickly.
Okay, thank you, Murat. Olga, great to hear from you.
Thank you. Well, in our case, it was like this. On the one hand, we had our local partners addressing us, and those partners were those who dealt with IDPs directly. And if we could provide some kind of assistance, our partners would come straight to us because they knew that we are kind of specialized in this kind of assistance. Our trainers and volunteers primarily tried to use every opportunity to get additional information and feedback with the IDPs. Even if we would come to a camp to play with children, as we go along, we would talk to their parents and try to gather as much information as possible. It's very difficult for people to be very outspoken from the very beginning, so it took us some time to help people feel that they're in security, so that they could be open, outspoken, and candid with us. There was a case, for instance, when a boy said that he wants to do football, but he cannot do football because he doesn't have proper gear. So we went to the store and we bought him the right boots. It was very helpful for him. I also would like to subscribe to what my colleagues have just said. In one of the shelters, for instance, we taught our beneficiaries in the area of project management, so that they could get together in certain hobby groups or groups of shared interests and communicate with each other. With other ADPs, our trainers who evacuated from Donetsk Oblast, and they moved to the shelter in Poltava Oblast. So we trained them to write business projects, and we provided them with the right inputs for that. Furniture, microwaves, all other inputs which are necessary for their offices to operate. And we help them to take care and to fend for themselves as well, so that it would not be just receiving assistance from us, but we would get them organized so that they could get off the ground and start doing projects on their own. It was very helpful, and people were gradually becoming self-dependent, because we cannot focus on one group of beneficiaries all the time. We need to spread our efforts. So first of all, we were focusing humanitarian assistance, but we cannot do this all the time. So it's key to provide people with tools, skills to empower them to resolve their problems on their own.
Okay, wonderful. Very important message coming through about working to support people, building skills, building livelihoods, even in this extremely unstable conditions. So thank you. Tamara, over to you on the question of feedback from beneficiaries.
Well, we received this feedback first due to my personal connections and liaisons. The administrator of our site assistance government, I asked him, Sasha, what were the requests that you received? And that was the direct channel of communication between him and myself. Then when we reached the targeted group of the beneficiaries, we were circulating survey and questionnaires. Basically, I was trying to tell them, naturally, we cannot feed them, for example, feed you. Think of something apart from cash assistance or food assistance. Anything else we can do. Over to you.
Wonderful. I'm conscious because we started late, we are a little bit pressed from time. I'd like to ask the panelists, do you have any questions for each other that you would like to know about, or something that one of you mentioned that you're interested to hear more about, rather than me or the audience controlling? It's important that you have options. Anything you'd like to ask each other or pick up on? Yeah, Murat, thank you.
As I already said at the beginning of the war, we helped evacuate people, and I would like to thank the NGOs and civil society organizations which were very helpful in that respect. Because the people whom we helped, most of them hadn't even no money for any kind of housing, and due to the assistance of civil society organizations, people were provided with places to live. This is really key. And in Moldova, people helped a lot us, and we will never forget that assistance. Thank you, Moldova.
Yeah, no, absolutely important. I think what we're hearing about the civil society, the voluntary, and also the support from people across Ukraine, neighboring countries, has been absolutely spectacular and crucial. And this is why we're interested in what can be learned from this experience to strengthen those type of responses in the future. Olga, Tamara, do you have any questions for each other? I think, Olga, you're unmuted, so you're hoping to say something.
Well, I'm always interested to know the following. We work a lot, and primarily on the volunteer basis. So my question is both to Murat and to Tamara. What gives you inspiration? Maybe some success stories. What keeps you guys going? What gives you strength and fortitude to march ahead in such difficult times? I would like to tell you about one story on the basis of our experience. We had a family from Mykolaiv Oblast, from the village of Snegireva, which was under occupation for a long time. Now it is liberated. That was a young family. They lost their house. It was a middle-class family. They used to have their own business. When they came to Odessa and addressed us for the first time, I saw how embarrassed they were to ask other people for assistance, because they never expected that this could happen to them. They always were self-reliant. But we did help them to get employment. They were provided with everything necessary to launch their small business in a safe place, and they did so. They could afford an apartment, and that was a brilliant example of how people could adapt to a new environment and to start their life anew in a new environment, just because they were given the right type of help. And they are not even going to go back. They are determined to stay on in our city. And such stories are really numerous. From the beginning of the war, those people were very close to the area of combat activities near the city of Mykolaiv, and a lot of IDPs from those places moved to Odessa, but we helped them all, and they are now going ahead.
I think it's often the grassroots stories that encourage this grassroots activity and keep it going. But Tamara, let's hear from you about what's helping you and your team.
Well, indeed the same. When you see that your efforts are not in vain, and when you see that this guy got a job station, this person got a job, then you assist indeed in practical terms. And another thing which may sound funny, feeling patriotic. You know, patriotism of a person who lives in the most poor country of Europe. We were just serving as a hub in Moldova. Many people just pass through Moldova into the westward direction. But there is huge gratitude to those who were staying with us, despite the fact that we are feeling a family. It is just family feeling that we want to give warmth and shelter. And this is indeed what is precious.
Thank you very much, Tamara. And I think we absolutely understand this fantastic work that's being done in Moldova. Really, actually, also shows that many underestimations and stereotypes about the country have certainly been smashed away with this. Was there any question you wanted to ask, Tamara, to the other two panelists? No? Okay, great.
I just want to express my admiration, a huge lot of admiration, because it is very difficult to live when you're on alone, but you find some inner force within you to assist other people. I have many friends, I have many relatives in Ukraine, so thank you for being there. Thank you for doing all this, what you do. Take care and be brave.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly hope that actually meeting and seeing the number of organizations, you can see in the Zoom list the number of the different organizations who are interested, but also hopefully gives some support for the work you're doing. I would just like to check now with the colleagues in London whether you'd like us to finish at 10 past as scheduled, or whether there's a little room to leak into the break until about perhaps 15 minutes.
Yes, I think we should take a little longer and invite some questions.
Wonderful, thank you. So that's then my my cue. First of all, for those of you online in particular, in the chat there was a link that has been sent. Very nice information packs about the organizations speaking, and the biographies of the particular colleagues speaking are available for you, which sort of gives very helpful context of what the organizations are doing. So that's a good place to look for information. Can I now invite questions from the audience? For those of you in Zoom, it's going to be easiest if you please type the question into the chat, if that's possible. And for those of you in London, in the audience, I'll ask Marcia and Alexia to help field questions. I can't see you actually now in London. So.
I have a question from Amra Wason to start us off.
Hello, it's very wonderful to hear what you're saying. I'm interested in how successfully you're able to coordinate with other civil society organizations. Do you feel that you're working, in some information isolation, or is there some coordination that means that you can tell who is doing what in different parts of your countries?
Was that question clear for the translators, just to clarify? Okay, thank you very much. So how are you able to work with other civil society organizations? Shall we something different? Shall we start with Tamara?
Coordinating with each other across Ukraine and Moldova, so that you can tell if there are gaps, whether you have an informational structure between them.
So how do you share information and coordinate with other organizations, whether within Ukraine or across between Ukraine and Moldova? Tamara, would you like to start, please?
Well, we were working with our partners, with the ones with whom we were interacting earlier. We didn't have such a huge, terrible situation as in Ukraine, where the mobile communication was even broken. We were interacting within organizations within Moldova, but we unfortunately do not have any partnership links with any civic community, civic society organizations in Ukraine. Over to you.
Olga, please.
Well, as regards the Ukrainian organizations, as I've already said, it's largely due to our cooperation that we had developed in the previous years that we managed to be so efficient, be it in the area of education or children's rights. We kept those ties, but we just readjusted our work on the basis of new challenges. Almost all of our projects cover 5 to 6 regions in Ukraine, so we focus on those who host the largest number of IDPs, for instance, and cooperate with them. And now we have started cooperating with the liberated regions of Ukraine, which were recently liberated and are gradually coming back to normal. So we try to be flexible and react to new environment. And on this note, I would like to thank BEARR Trust, because thanks to your recommendation, we got in touch with the Street Child. It's a very efficient organization, and we have a large project that we work together on with them. And we have another project which is focused on psychological support for children, educational issues for children, and so on. So for our organization, the challenges were numerous, but being in touch with those foreign partners empowered us a lot and helped us to do the things which we would not be able to do otherwise. So we are very grateful for you to you for bringing us in contact with that organization.
Wonderful, thank you. So also kind of very gratifying to hear about the positive links between organizations in Ukraine and Moldova and internationally or outside. Marat, would you like to say anything about, I think you mentioned it previously, the working with other organizations?
Yes. Well, first of all, we keep in touch with numerous organizations doing similar kind of work elsewhere in Ukraine. We communicate with them on a regular basis. We exchange relevant information, but the only thing that I'd like to add is that we do have some problematic issues dealing with governmental organizations, but this is primarily because of the bureaucratic procedures. They do want to help, but the red tape and bureaucracy sometimes takes its toll.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Are there other questions coming from the room in London?
Yes, please speak up.
And if you could we just ask you to introduce yourself when you pose the question, and that'll be helpful for us online.
Judith Fableson from World Jewish Relief. Related to the question on coordination, and I don't know if perhaps this is what you're alluding to, Marat, but I wondered if any of the panelists have had experience with the larger international aid agencies or the UN cluster system set up for coordination, and whether there was any commentary on that.
So just to repeat for those online, if you didn't catch it, the question is whether any of the organizations talking now have had experience with the larger international organizations and or United Nations system, and whether there's lessons to be learned from that. You can just shake your head if there is no experience, or if you would like to talk, please just switch the microphone on. Tamara, you're smiling. Okay, let's go Olga, and then Tamara, and then Meera.
Well, the large-scale donors very much present in Ukraine. UNDP is a good case in point. We had good cooperation with them even before the war. Our first project of cooperation with them was done with this particular organization. So we do have partnership ties with them, and they contacted us first because they knew that we are engaged this, and they suggested that we cooperate with them. So the initiative basically came from them. And then we started thinking about what kind of work we could do together with them. And it worked out fine. We also cooperate a lot with the US Embassy. Before the war, we had a project with the US Embassy, which was quite a success. We also cooperate with the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm also working on a program which is sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway. We have large British donors. We have the foundation of the Council of Europe, which is cooperating with us as well. So we try to work on the international basis and to keep the cooperation ties which we had before the war. And we also are very grateful to our partners for being so flexible, because they also adapt their programs depending on the circumstances. Before the war, the projects had one character, and now they are tailoring them to the new situation in Ukraine, and they provide what is most needed at this point in time.
Really valuable to hear how the experiences are going. Tamara, can we go to you?
Well, perhaps my story will be as a comic relief. You see, I have come to offer our services on psychological support into the municipal shelter. Somebody as a bodyguard met me. What sort of burning out? We have everything fine. No fire, no fire, no fire brigades. You don't have anything to do here. So that was kind of a joke. They just put down my number, but nobody ever telephoned on psychological assistance, because they thought that burning out at work and fire brigade, these are synonyms.
Yes, just to clarify, Tamara, which organization was that you were trying to approach, or was it a large international?
It was just the mayor office, the municipal shelter that we offered our assistance. No, we are a very small company. We are a very small group. So we are on the grassroots, started and staying.
Yeah. But this is very interesting in terms of the cooperation, or the difficulties in cooperation with government authorities that I know Murat, you also alluded to. But if we go to Murat about any contacts with large international funders, and how is that going?
For some time, we worked as an initiative group without an official status, and then we got an official status of a charity organization. And now we're only looking for large international partners and donors. Recently, we had a conference in Odessa attended by foreign donor organizations, and our representatives also attended that event. So now we are looking for partners at the international level, but don't have any ready-made experiences yet.
I think this is, I mean, also very interesting. I also urge again the audience to look at the information pack on the descriptions of the organizations, and you'll see that, for example, Morales organization next, only think registered 2021, and so they're at different stages of official recognition and working with being able to work with international authorities or government authorities. Maybe now I'd just like to read out some of the questions and support to you from the chat online. From Gareth Howard, we have that it's been a strong privilege to listen to the three speakers and hear about your amazing work. And he wants to offer support, well, to congratulate the support that you're offering and continuing to provide for the people of Ukraine, wherever they are. The message is that you are the light in the darkness, and you will shine bright by your own actions and with any support that can be provided from abroad. We certainly hope that you stay safe and send love and positivity for you. I'd also like to go to the question from Vanessa, representing Christian Aid. And the question is very interesting, or it's asking, with a question or statement, whether donors are also supportive of your staff, the welfare of your staff, the well-being of your staff. Like, is there, how have you tried to look after your staff, and do donors recognize that staff well-being is also important? We have very limited time, so just 2-sentence answers would be great. Olga, you seem to have the most international sort of experience and donor experience. Is staff well-being an issue that comes up?
Well, it largely depends on the area of the project. There are some large and long projects for half a year or a year, in which case we include expenditures for trainers, remuneration for trainers, for staff, and so on. The UNDP project, for instance, supported the network of our trainers a lot, because they worked with children in our shelters and they received salaries for that. That was very helpful for them, because we provided people with job and we provided them with salaries. Sometimes the projects have targeted orientation and aimed at purely at assistance to our beneficiaries, in which case there is no remuneration for staff. So it really depends. There was one project, 20,000 euros worth for the equipment for the shelter, but not a single cent was earmarked for our staff. So everything depends on the character of the project. But even with that kind of projects, we are happy, because even if we get assistance purely for the beneficiaries, this is efficient anyway. But of course, we are trying to have more projects which would include remuneration for staff as well.
I think this is at this time when the livelihoods are so vulnerable and so fragile, this question of under what conditions staff and volunteers are working is important. Tamara, I know you put your hand up in response to this question on staff well-being.
Indeed. The project that we can include salaries or wages of our teams, this is something that perhaps is necessary. Basically, we have received some funds now to assist us, our own staff, to have a psychological session to assist us against this psychological burning out, because this is indeed very important. Thank you.
I'd like to add that before the war, we did have projects which included expenditures for salary of the staff, but from the beginning of the war, of the large-scale war, everyone have been working on voluntary basis, free of charge, because we understand that money is most needed for the basic necessities for people, from food products, medicines, and so on. I think it's really crucial to provide psychological support for the staff, because burnout of staff is really an acute issue. So we need to keep people going and to help them remain strong and have fortitude for new challenges.
Now it's time for me to bring this panel to a close by expressing huge thanks and admiration and best wishes to all three of you. Olga, I hope everything is okay. I see you're now in the dark, so you've raised a wide range of issues that we've been learning about. My list of notes is huge. I'm sure people in the audience have also would love to kind of learn more, everything ranging from responding quickly, building, learning from people, receiving feedback from people, changing with organizations. It's really been valuable to learn about the grassroots responses and from three very different organizations and contexts in which you're working. The second panel is going to pick up these messages and think about lessons for the future and planning for the short-term and medium-term future. I'll just need to check with colleagues in London what time you'd like us back online.
We managed with a 15-minute break.
15-minute break, so that would bring us back at 3:45 UK time, 5:45 in Ukraine. Other time zones, sorry, I'm not quite going to be with you, but a 15-minute break. And I think, please, online and in the room, we need to give certainly a massive round of, it's tragic to give applause in these circumstances, but at least applause and support to Olga, Murat, and Tamara. Thank you very much. Please do check the organization's websites and information profiles. And we wish you, we know that you're extremely busy, Murat, Olga, and Tamara. So we do wish you goodbye and thank you. And we look forward to staying in touch and offering support as we can for your organizations. So, for those of you staying with us online, we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to our 4 new panelists. And thanks to our interpreters who are going to help. We will remember not to speak too fast. I'm going to introduce all our 4 panelists at the beginning, and they will speak in the order in which I have introduced them. We have Rasell from Kyiv, who has been the President's Advisor on Child Rights and Child Rehabilitation since 2021. And she also has a role
on the Coordinating Council on the Protection of Children's Rights in under martial law, and Secretary of the Coordinating Council for the Protection and Safety of Children under the President of Ukraine. Our second speaker will be Anna Bondarenko, whose base is Odessa, who is founder and chief executive officer of the Ukrainian Volunteer Service, which has 17 staff members and over 100,000 volunteers. Next, we have Irina Los, who is based in Nikopol, which has been suffering very severe bombardments, and we're really pleased to see you there, Irina. She is a lawyer and head of the structural division of Nikopol Center for Spiritual and Social Psychological Rehabilitation, called Open Doors. And her organization provides humanitarian aid, legal assistance, and psychological assistance. From Moldova, we have Liliana Rotaru, who is the president and founder of CCF Moldova, Children, Communities and Families. And so we have covered quite a lot of the ground of our region geographically with our 4 speakers. We are going to focus in this session on the way forward, the winter and beyond, and how the civil society organizations and voluntary groups working in both Ukraine and in Moldova are going to tackle the challenges that face them. And the challenges are, to some extent, already visible and known, and some new ones are appearing every day. So this is a very important discussion. And we hope that all of our panelists and other people who are on the Zoom conference will be able to share ideas as to how to deal with these challenges. Daria, please go ahead.
I hope you can hear me well. I will start by telling you about how it all began, where we stand now, and what we are expecting and what we are supposed to do for the future. So on the 24th of February, the life of more than 7.5 million Ukrainian children who lived in Ukraine before the beginning of the large-scale war changed once and forever. Some of them woke up to the sounds of shelling, and others realized that an enemy had attacked our country. More than 2,200 children suffered. 441 children died. 441 children's voices will never be heard. And they are only the people about whom we are aware that they died. But there are a lot of cases which we don't know, because with every liberated town and village, we discover new deaths and new victims. But the life of children in Ukraine will never be the same anyway. Shellings, bomb shelters, not being able to go to school or kindergarten, to play with your friends, to hug your relatives the way they did before February 24. That's the awful reality of life. Some remained at home and never moved. Others moved to more secure places in Ukraine or elsewhere. Some remained with their children. Some moved without their parents. Some lost their parents. Irrespective of where children are today, their lives are much more difficult than before the war. It hurts me even to think about it, let alone to speak about it, because I am a mother myself. And during the first months of the large-scale war, I even slept with my daughter in the same bed, because she's too scared by the sounds of shelling. millions of children go through awful stress experiences, and it takes its toll. It's also difficult for children who left their homes and live in an unknown environment. And it is still more difficult for children who had to leave for abroad, let alone the children who are there without their parents because their parents had to stay behind in Ukraine. Sometimes children are totally on their own. People around them speak foreign languages. The schools in the host countries have other subjects and curricula. There's no customary way of communicating and connecting with your peers, and they all want to come back home. They're not typical refugees who would like to stay in those countries. They are very eager to come back home. They are not refugees, they are the children who seek temporary shelter to stay alive. Apart from the local schools, they attend Ukrainian schools online because they have to continue this education process. And this double workload is very painful for them. Their parents, in the meantime, are trying hard to find new jobs and means of existence. It's especially tough for parents of disabled children, because it's very difficult for them to get necessary assistance. Today, every Ukrainian family which found shelter in the EU, in an EU country, is faced with the problem of housing, of finding proper medical assistance, social assistance, and well-being, how to make money for their temporary stay in the countries where they ended up, and how not to lose their contact with Ukraine, with their Ukrainian roots, and to be able to come back to their homeland. Speaking about the children who remained in Ukraine, the massive shellings of the 10th and 17th of October and of the 15th of November, which was very recently, ended in a situation that people living in Ukraine can never know when they will end up without any electric power, communication, telephone coverage, and all the rest. And now, as we speak, I don't have electric power in my house. I use a generator, but not every family in Ukraine has access to a generator. The aggressor country is killing Ukraine physically and morally. And today, we adults who are responsible should think about what we all together should do about our children, how to help those who left our country and accompanied by their parents and not accompanied by their parents, and how to help those who stayed behind in Ukraine, especially the disabled children, because they have to go through the whole processes of restoring their livelihood. We have to work out clear-cut ways and algorithms of how to get medical, social, and psychological support for different categories of children, and to figure out how we can help those families both in Ukraine and beyond. Now we have to work out together with the host countries an algorithm which would be based on a step-by-step plan of what is to be done in each of those countries to provide these people with all their basic necessities. Normally, at this time of the year, people in Ukraine think about what they're going to do during Christmas season, but now every day is a challenge for us. And obviously, we cannot think about holidays. So we all together have to make sure that we all together, we should regain fortitude and an opportunity to think and look to the future, not just about the present time. And with this, I would like to conclude my intro, and I will be very much willing to take part in the following discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. Clearly, the challenges facing children outside Ukraine and those inside Ukraine are somewhat different. Thank you for this. Now, Anna, would you like to present your thoughts on this and your own issues?
Hello, everybody. It's a really great pleasure to be here today with you and such amazing colleagues from Ukraine as well. And today I would like to start with a little overview of the scope of our work and how it has changed during the last several weeks and months. And I'm Anna Bondarenko. I'm from Ukraine, Odessa, and I'm leader of Ukrainian Volunteer Service, which is one of the biggest volunteer organizations in Ukraine. For the last 5 years, we've been working to promote the culture of volunteering in Ukraine, so that every person, regardless of their age, gender, religious or political views, can develop themselves through volunteering and helping others. And of course—
Anna, could I just ask you to speak a little more slowly so the interpreters can manage?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So for the 5 years, we've been working to engage people in volunteering in all different kinds of activities: social help, supporting the children, the elderly, providing humanitarian assistance to those in need. And of course, on February 24, our team and our devoted volunteers have all woke up to the sound of explosions and started to coordinate our activities online in chats. As a team, we have been preparing to the full-scale invasion. We've been working since early January to develop safety protocols. We've been working to identify our volunteers from the regions that probably would be affected the most with the Russian invasion, but none of us could really expect the size of the Russian aggression, of the war, and none of us could actually expect how big will be the attack, both on the first day of the invasion, and then, of course, through spring, through summer, and now, of course, through the autumn. So for us, as a volunteer-based organization, we had started to coordinate people, the ones who wanted to help, with organizations and initiatives that needed this help. And since the February 24, we've got more than 100,000 volunteers from all over Ukraine and abroad who decided to volunteer and to help. And among those community, we saw both teenagers, the ones who were 15, 16 years old. We saw people in the mid of their careers, the ones who were ready to volunteer in their free time after work or even instead of their work time. We saw people who were retired and who started to help the soldiers, to coordinate activities for the internally displaced persons, for the military and civilians. And during this year, we also saw that on the one hand, Ukrainian volunteer community is extremely resilient. We saw how people were really fast to react. So they were the first one who started to fundraise, to help the children, to help in the shelters. On the one hand, now being almost, in the winter, we see how even this resilient community is becoming tired, exhausted, and in many ways burned out. And that is a reality that we are facing. One of the things that we are seeing in our community is that we have volunteers who are staying in the occupied territories. Those are the people who have been staying in Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblast under Russian occupation, and they refused to evacuate to more safe regions of Ukraine or abroad. And when we asked them, okay, so why are you staying? It is not safe for you to be there. They say that we will stay until the Ukrainian armed forces will liberate this region, because we are the ones who can help, because of course Russians are not letting any help in. And I would like to share a little bit of how volunteering and civil society looks right now in the occupied territories. So in Ukraine, we see this tremendous support of international organizations. We see how international organizations bring tons of food, medicine, hygiene to the deoccupied territories, to the liberated territories. Unfortunately, none of this happens in the occupation, because Russian forces are not letting any support to be entered into the occupied Melitopol, Energodar, Tokmak, and all of the other cities. The idea is that Russians are trying to show that Ukrainians and the world don't care about people who are in occupation. And of course, they say that Russia cares about you. But when we are looking at the reality of the life in the occupation, we see that people, on the one hand, they don't have an opportunity to earn money. There is almost no job, except the ones with the Russian soldiers. There is no opportunity for a lot of people to get any support, either monetary or with food, hygiene, whatever. And the elderly, especially the ones who are stuck in their houses, in the villages, the ones who cannot move, they basically have no opportunity to get this support. And many of them are living without opportunity to eat properly, to have proper medicine care, and whatsoever. So that's why we are supporting volunteers who are staying right now in the occupied territories. We are supporting them with the money, so they can then transfer this money from their cards to either hryvnia, or sometimes in some regions to rubles, because there is no hryvnia anymore. And then they go and they buy groceries, they buy medicine, and they use bicycles to drive those packages to people in need. And even those volunteers are interrogated by Russians. They are always interrogated. Some of them are kept in the special so-called like temporary jails. Many of them lose contacts with their families, especially the ones who are right now in Ukraine, because Russians see volunteers as one of the biggest threats, because they know that those people are waiting for Ukrainian forces to liberate those territories. And when we are coming into the winter, we realize that there are huge troubles, of course, in Ukrainian controlled territory, with electricity, with economy, with children, with the elderly. But what happens in the occupation is even worse, because there is almost no volunteers who are ready to help. So to my mind, this is also a really important thing, because while our armed forces are working to liberate those territories, we need to make sure that people who are staying there and cannot leave are getting at least like the minimum support, with the life needed products, medicine and stuff. And that is something that is really important for many networks, non-public networks that are ready to help. So I will end with that, and I would love to answer more about what happens in occupation, because one other thing that is really interesting is that we cannot be public about that. We cannot go to the media and share the stories of volunteers helping in the occupation, because in the next day, Russians will capture and torture the person that we are talking about. So even though this is not public, it is really important to remember that those people are there. They're still alive, they're still breathing, and they still need our support.
Thank you, Anna. And thank goodness for digital transfers of money. How on earth would we cope without that? Thank you. Now, Irina from Nikopol, please tell us about your work.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I'm glad I can attend this panel. We in Ukraine live in very difficult times because of the war unleashed by the Russian Federation. And the war has basically hit every Ukrainian person, every Ukrainian family. I'd like to tell you about the current situation in my native city of Nikopol. I should preface this by saying that this is one of the most insecure cities in Ukraine. It's just a few kilometers away from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is across the Dnieper River on the opposite side. And even though Enerhodar is the city where the NVP is located, the situation was more or less quiet until the 12th of July. But then massive shellings by the Russian Federation started. They deployed multiple launch rocket systems on the territory of the NPP, and any military return of fire by our military might create a lethal danger. And the flight time of a shell from that place to ours is 2 to 3 minutes. The situation is very difficult because of constant shellings in Nikopol. More than 400 high-rise buildings have been destroyed, and several hundred private houses were demolished. A lot of houses have had their window panes shattered. Out of 120,000 residents, about 30,000 only remained. And most of them have to spend the nights in shelters because the shellings are ongoing all the time. At the time of dusk, people moved to shelters or to more secure places. And in summertime, a lot of people spend their nights out in the field. And it's only those who work at public sector organizations who remained in the downtown Nikopol. Or elderly people who cannot move, or the disabled who have no money to move elsewhere. So unfortunately, it's impossible to have normal livelihood in this kind of situation. Every day brings new challenges, and we have to focus on those who are most in need. And now, as winter is approaching, Nikopol is faced up with the danger of a host of new challenges. They will have to spend nights in cold, unheated shelters, or live in houses without central heating, gas supply, water, lighting. There are lots of facilities of critical infrastructure which are absolutely endangered. We're looking forward to peace on the Ukrainian land, and it should be added that our organization, due to assistance from BEARR Trust, we've managed to support more than 8,000 people from Nikopol, Kharkiv, Kherson cities. From the beginning of the large-scale war, we help people evacuate to more secure places or to go abroad. We now are primarily focused on Nikopol and Nikopol province, especially those who are disabled. We seek to provide them with at least basic necessities: food, clothing, medications, toiletries. Among the most acute needs during wintertime, we should name torches, generators, warm blankets, power banks, toiletries, and such like. On the basis of our organization, there's a special service providing legal and social support to people, because people are very much in stress and they're in constant state of anxiety because of what is going on. Because what is going on is totally beyond their control. And they keep hearing about the war all the time. And they live in the environment of anxiety. They feel very insecure. That's why we need to do everything possible to support them psychologically, and also in terms of legal assistance, as well as in terms of social payments, getting IDP statuses, and so on. Among the major challenges faced by the NGOs in our area, there are social and economic problems. Because this is really key for the operation of any NGO or volunteer organization. The means of subsistence for them and the basic security and safety for themselves and their families is really key if we want to retain the potential of social assistance organizations. No matter whether people stay close to the occupied territories or plan to go abroad. But irrespective of all those challenges, our organization keeps on working and helping the residents of Nicola and beyond. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the BEARR Trust for your kind assistance. With your help, I'm sure we will assure our victory as soon as possible. That's all from me at this point. I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. So there we have a view from an area very close to the occupied territories, but not actually occupied, but under constant bombardment. Liliana, a view from Moldova from you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon and good evening for Moldovan and Ukrainian colleagues. And thank you very much to BEARR Trust for inviting me to speak about CCF Moldova experience in supporting refugees from Ukraine. We have started in early March with setting up a blue dot on the northern border of Moldova and Ukraine at Mohilev-Podolsk and Otach in the Moldovan part. The blue dot is a hub where refugees are receiving 24 hours, 7 out of 7 information, wash facilities, refreshments, mother and baby corner, a safe place, hygiene supplies, whatever is needed, and even short-term rest. This is not a residential facility, so refugees could not spend time, but we also provide transportation during the night in case they arrive and they need to leave to go to a bus station, train station, or at the refugee accommodation center. I'd like to share a little bit about our work in 2 other type of communities, because as I mentioned, Blue Dot is a place where people are coming, are staying for minutes or hours, but not days, and then they are moving mostly to 3 directions. One is leaving Moldova and going abroad. Second is going to communities, to towns and villages and cities of Moldova. And third is going to refugee accommodation centers around Moldova. We are mostly working with with people who go and live in refugee accommodation centers, and to a lesser extent with those who live in communities. And the reason for that is there is quite limited access to people living in communities. For obvious reasons, it is more difficult to reach these people. We sometimes assume that people maybe are not in need of our services and support, but it could also be that the information about available services is not reaching these people, and this would be the most concerning reason of all. I don't know if you are aware of this figure. Maybe it is not comparable with millions of refugees who crossed into the other countries, but we have received since early March almost 695,000 refugees, and over 95,000 refugees are still living in Moldova. We have provided, the Moldovan government has provided until now several rounds of extension of the 90 days period of stay in Moldova. And right now, Moldovan government has drafted the so-called Temporary Protection Act, which is not yet voted, but when it will be voted, it will allow refugees to stay in Moldova up to 1 year, providing all rights, including right of children to attend education, because up until now, only children in families who have applied for asylum status could study in Moldovan schools. But here I need to make an explanation. Everyone can enroll in Moldovan schools, but will not be able to receive certificates and attestation of studies if they are not in this legal status. Now, with the new Protection Act, children in families who are not asylum seekers will also be able to attend school and receive all certification, diplomas, so on and so forth. So what do we do in refugee accommodation centers, and how is the approaching winter affecting refugees living there? Because CCF is a child rights organization, our main focus are children and families with children. Several of speakers from Ukraine have mentioned the level of stress that children are going through. So the first type of activity we are offering children is the so-called Teams Up. These are structured activities, movement-based. It involves very little language, because we assume that maybe not all children will speak Russian. All in Moldovans, most of us are bilingual. Romanian is our first language, but most of us speak Russian. But we just don't assume that all children will speak Russian. So this is a evidence-based structured activity which reduces stress. I want to tell you that children are coming repeatedly, and even when the facilitators are not there to do the activities, but are there to support children's parents, children always come up to ask for more of these activities. For parents or caregivers,
same amount. Yeah.
So going back to support provided to caregivers, most of refugees who arrived to Moldova with their children, most families, so to say, are mothers or grandmothers or groups of women coming with children. And again, we need to acknowledge their level of stress, their level of anxiety, of loss, and their sometimes I don't want to use the word inability, but reluctance to plan ahead, because they are losing all stability. They can't plan for tomorrow or for the next month. Sometimes many people are waiting to go back home. They want to return as quickly as possible. Many people have planned to stay for a very short period of time, and unfortunately, they feel this period is extending, is lengthening. So we are supporting caregivers with psychological counseling, both group and individual, and also with informative sessions conducted by social workers and psychologists. We also provide a play area for children, and I remember in spring when we asked mothers what kind of books and toys or games children need. They always said that this is something they didn't think of bringing, or maybe they got just one toy for the children, and children needed art supply, and they needed books and toys, and they needed to live a life as normal as possible. Although I agree, it couldn't go back to normal just because of the toys and books we provided. We have also provided in 6 refugee accommodation centers music therapy for children. We had a group of experts from UK charity helping facilitators to learn about music therapy, to bring it to children, again to release the energy which pent up, and release the anxiety, and also express themselves. We have also had training from Clowns Without Borders to bring fun and laughter and games to children. So maybe what I wanted to share is how much we try to bring to children a feeling of normalcy, of spending time with their friends and their peers, and maybe feel less anxiety. What we didn't manage to do is to bring all children back to schools because that was their parents' choice, or because in some groups children didn't go to school in Ukraine. We have had groups of children who were 10, 11, and they didn't attend school. And now, of course, it's quite difficult to encourage parents to start sending children to school. In one of the refugee accommodation center, one of my colleagues, a social worker, is there at 7 in the morning every day to make sure that parents did not forget that this is a school day, that the parents managed to prepare the breakfast or provide something for the child to eat at school. Employment and income generation.
Liliana,
Yes.
Can you finish soon, please?
Yes, of course. The winter challenges, of course, is winter clothes and winter equipment, firewoods, because it's really difficult to get it here in Moldova. Of course, payments for bills, and an important issue, social cohesion, because we start feeling some concern and some even complaints in local communities that refugees are getting everything as people feel, and local communities don't get enough while they also struggle. So I will end here, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you. Sorry for going over.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Liliana. It was very wide-ranging and interesting. And what you said about the difficulty for people to plan for the future because they don't know when they can go back, certainly resonates with me, having hosted a Ukrainian family here in London for 6 months. They can't plan. They can't make plans. So thank you. And we now have a bit of time for both questions to our panelists and questions from our panelists to each other, or further comments. One question I'd like to throw in is, we've heard about the kind of assistance that is being provided by volunteers across Ukraine and in Moldova. And I'm wondering what the availability of food and toiletries and other blankets, warm clothes, all these things that people are going to desperately need in the winter, whether they're in the occupied or unoccupied areas. Are these goods available in the shops if there is money to buy them? Anybody like to comment on that? Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the mic was off. So I can start, and I know that colleagues also have their experience, maybe Irina, but from what we are seeing right now, sorry for speaking too fast. From what we are seeing right now, most of the regular goods are available right now in Ukraine. So when we are talking about anything like food, medicine, blankets, all of this can be bought within the country. And it is really important because if we want to support Ukrainian economy, right, it's better to buy within Ukraine than to bring from the outside. But from what we are seeing, there are challenges with specific items. For example, everything like with generators, that is a big challenge right now, because I think that Ukrainians bought like 100% of generators available on our market. So that is one of the things that needs to be brought in Ukraine. And right now, one of the challenges for volunteers is, of course, with the customs, because it takes time, to go outside the country, for example, to Romania, to buy the generator there, to bring it to Ukraine. And that's one of the challenges. This needs to be supported. Also, from what we are seeing, there is some additional needs with also like this winterization efforts. So, for example, different batteries, different stuff that you can use to cook when there is no electricity. Of course, all of that is really important. And also with the warm clothes, there is warm clothes available in Ukraine, but there is a need of additional, clothes, so special clothes that you wear, to keep yourself warm, like the underlayer of this.
Thermal underwear.
Yeah, thermal underwear. So If there's an opportunity to bring those outside in the country, that is amazing, because in the country, like most of these have been already been bought. And even though Ukrainian small businesses and volunteers, they are, like bringing it in the country, the need is still way bigger. And also what is really important, one other thing, in the media lately, there has been a narrative that it's hard to transfer stuff within the country because of the Russian missiles. We don't see this as a problem right now. So in our community, we see that within the country, we can easily and really fast transfer goods, for example, from Lviv to Kyiv, then from Kyiv to Zaporizhia. That is not a problem. The trains, the cars, the buses, they are working regularly. And that is really, it can be really fast shipped even within the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to comment on this? Liliana.
Yes, if I may, please. We also have the same difficulties with the generators, but also firewood, as already mentioned, because many people who have been using gas for heating their homes are now, because it's so unreliable and extremely expensive. So people have started to buy wood, and many people have bought lots, too much maybe, in summer. So now we have a huge deficit of firewood. And just to mention, for the Blue Dot, we have prepared warm socks and thermal underwear to be distributed if people will be arriving and they will have not enough or maybe not at all.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Another topic I think we should perhaps go back to. Oh, sorry, Irina.
I also would like to add to that. I've already spoken about that during my introduction. What I mean is that since we have frequent power outages now, there's a whole host of new challenges has appeared, and all the power banks, generators, torches have been sold out, and there's a huge need for them. In the city of Nikopol, for instance, we provide people with folding beds, for instance, which are very much needed in shelters, and movable stoves that use firewood are also very much in short supply. Firewood stoves really, they can be found in Ukraine, but it's really a crunch. And finance obviously is a problem, because we have to purchase a lot of stuff for people, and all this requires expenditures. That's it.
Thank you. Now, what about the issue of stress, particularly among children? Would anybody, I mean, Daria and other speakers have commented on the challenges that children are going through, and their families, of course, too. Are there any further comments on this, and what help can be given? I presume a lot of psychologists are already engaged in doing what they can. The play groups and play spaces are obviously very valuable. Are there any further comments on this, or any other issues our panel would like to raise? Daria, before you leave us, have you got any further comments?
Thank you. I was thrown out of the event just because the generator ran out of fuel. So I apologize for that. I was thrown out of normal life for a few minutes. I'd like to comment on what you've just asked me about as regards psychological support and assistance to children. We have to appreciate that parents are the people who provide children with psychological assistance. First of all, it's just like in an airplane, you put a life jacket on your child first and then on yourself. And likewise, in Ukraine, each and every child has been traumatized by the war. And I can tell you this with certainty as a presidential representative for children's rights. My daughter is 14 years old, and she has a hearing impairment, and it's very difficult for her. My husband is serving in the military now, and my daughter is very much traumatized about that because she's so worried for her dad, and she sees her mom very frequently because I have to attend my work on a regular basis. So we do have to help parents help their children first of all. I'm very thankful to you for inviting me to attend this event after the event which was organized by the First Lady of Ukraine. The event was called the Strategic Session for Mental Health of Children and Teenagers. And I think this kind of events and this kind of services will be very popular in Ukraine in the near and mid-term future. Especially we're talking about the disabled children. When we speak about things like generators and so on, we should also be mindful about specialized medical requirements of the disabled. The generators for the disabled children should be used not just for lighting and for heating, but also to provide power for the facilities and equipment which these children need as disabled people, some additional devices and so on. Likewise, some toiletries should be specialized for the disabled children. We also are very much in need of wheelchairs for the disabled children. We need hearing aids for children with hearing impairments. And this list can run on and on and on. We should understand that apart from humanitarian assistance, psychological and mental support for families with disabled children is absolutely key. And now we're planning a special program for families with children with disabilities, so that those parents would always have a channel of communication which they could use to get specialized assistance, where they could get information about humanitarian warehouses where specialized facilities and goods are kept specifically for the disabled children. I'm very thankful to our volunteer community. I have been working with an organization helping children with hearing impairments for 10 years. And I know of all people how important this interaction and cooperation may be, because it is due to this interaction and cooperation that we can withstand all those difficulties. So I thank my colleagues from the NGO sector who are present at this panel. I would like to thank you sincerely on behalf of myself and the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daria. I know Liliana has her hand up, and we've got a question, I think, from the floor here in a moment. How long do we have, Nicola, before you, or Marcia, before? Another 5-10 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Liliana, your hand is up.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it short. Just two reflections. We need to learn in Moldova how to bring in teenagers, adolescents into activities, because so far what we saw is that they keep to themselves, so to say, but probably not just because they are teenagers, but also because of the way they live through trauma and stress. My second reflection is we need, as probably sector, I mean civil society, but also social services, educational services, to become a trauma-informed workforce and professionals to understand how to support children, adults as well, going through stress. And my final reflection will be, we need to look after our staff as well, because when we started, I personally was so naive. I hoped that this will end very quickly with a beautiful victory. Everyone will come in, will help, and the enemy will be fought. But it's almost 9 months now. So when we started with a huge level of enthusiasm and energy, this is a resource which is consumable. So we need to look after our staff, just as we try to look after people we work to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions here. One is from Heather Stacey. She's asking about how the sudden upsurge in volunteering, the increase in willingness to do volunteering work in Ukraine and Moldova, how this can be maintained in the medium and longer term. Are there any thoughts on this? Anna, this is right in your field.
Yeah, I can start and other colleagues can add from their perspective. So what we are seeing right now is actually a shift in public understanding of what volunteering means and look like. We have already seen how in first 2012, with a big soccer championship, everybody started to talk about volunteering in the cultural sphere, sport events. Then, of course, after the Evolution of Dignity, we had seen how thousands of people explored volunteering, and with the beginning of the wars, they started to help military. But what is different right now is that finally we see how, with the full-scale invasion, volunteering started to become both really visible, but also really a personal choice for thousands of people. And the latest research in Ukraine actually shows that out of all people who decided to stay in Ukraine and not to evacuate, around 82% of people stated that they are doing either volunteer work or regular support with donations to some volunteer initiatives. What is also different, and it's important to outline that, is that before the full-scale invasion, mostly volunteers were engaged by charitable organizations or non-profit organizations, so some kind of official registered group. Right now, we are seeing a shift in this as well. We are seeing how people mostly volunteer in non-formal volunteer initiatives, community-based initiatives, so less volunteering with official organizations and more of self-organization, like local groups, really grassroots initiatives. And that is really great on the one hand, because we see how people engaged in volunteering. For a lot of them, that is the first time in their life they're doing something considered to be charitable activity, philanthropic activity. On the one hand, there is a huge challenge with supporting the capacity and the willingness of all those people to volunteer. And there is a big discussion among Ukrainian nonprofits right now. We are having a great discussion of how we can both support our staff who works with volunteers so they will not burn out, then to support the volunteer leaders, these newcomers, to teach them how to coordinate activities, how to lead initiative, how to fundraise. And then, of course, the third part of this is the capacity support to newly organized initiatives. And to my personal belief, the last one is really important, to support these new organizations, little ones, with skills, with knowledge, with education, with little funding, to develop their initiatives so they will feel more comfortable to change from just, chaotic volunteering to doing a nonprofit job as a job or just a regular activity. But my personal belief is that this change have already happened, the change to good in volunteering. So now there is a big challenge to sustain it. But also what we are seeing is that there is a great support from the government. on a national level, not on a local level, but on a national level, there is support to the Ministry of Youth and Sports to support those volunteer initiatives. There is a national volunteer platform that have been established last year by the Ministry of Youth and Sports to promote local volunteer opportunities. So we are seeing a change for good in this. But yeah, my answer would be invest in capacity of newly organized organizations and invest in skills in volunteer management so that people will have more personal capacity, psychological capacity to lead through the winter and of course next year and then after our victory in rebuilding Ukraine.
Thank you, and very heartening to hear that the government is encouraging volunteering. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry. I thought. Right. Oh, Daria raised her hand earlier. That's all right. Any questions? We have one more online. Are there any questions from this room? Because we are running out.
Can I ask that you please stand up?
Please stand up and
project
introduce
when,
yourself.
when
Yes.
asking your questions in the room. Please.
Hi, my name's Graham Prescott, and I understand that Roma gypsy families have always had pretty tough times in Ukraine, and I understand that they've had an even more difficult time if they're kind of having, you know, to move, to leave, to seek refuge. Have any of your organisations had experience?
That was a question about the Roma communities in Ukraine and other gypsy communities. Have any of our panelists encountered their difficulties during the war? Liliana, you have.
Yes, I couldn't hear very well the full question. Was it only about experience with Roma communities or something specific?
It's about the difficulties that they're experiencing.
Yes. Well, I would say that there is some hidden discrimination when Roma communities are distributed through RACs. It has been explained that Roma communities want to stay together, that they live in large families. That is their preference. It wasn't checked that that was the case, but as a result, we have several refugee accommodation centers where Roma communities are overrepresented. The main challenges is that the accommodation is overcrowded because sometimes you may have a family of between 7 and 14 in one large room, but still it's just one room. There is quite a high incidence of substance misuse, domestic violence, children witnessing, and unfortunately, most children do not attend school online or in face-to-face in person. However, we have seen some wonderful changes when you are there and you work with these communities. It's not maybe a big achievement, but we have managed to enroll 14 children in school, and some of them were 13. 10 of them are attending school day by day. 4 of them are not permanently attending the school. Children are really enjoying the team-up activities and non-formal education activities at the center in the refugee accommodation center. So my personal experience, my message would be that we need more time and we need more people to support communities. We need to build trust, first of all, to be able to encourage people to change some things, to raise awareness that school is important, hygiene is important, employment is important. And another challenge which we faced initially at the beginning is a lack of documentation. When the war started, Moldova has let in everyone from Ukraine with documents, with copies of documents, with invalid documents. But when people decide to move out of Moldova, they do need proper documents because other countries are not accepting people with invalid documentation. So these were the main challenges that we have encountered.
Thank you very much. Daria, I know you want to comment too, and then we're going to wind up. So Daria, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to add that I am a representative of Roma nationality. I'm a Roma myself, so I'm a live example. And I would like to say that in Ukraine, it is very difficult to overcome the stigmatization of the Roma children and Roma families. But I can say that over the last few years, we've made a real breakthrough in this respect, and we continue to continue moving in the right direction. The State Migration Service has done a lot to help Roma people to get proper documents. We very much encourage people to provide their children with proper documents and so on. This work is going to continue, and I know that there's a whole separate program to that effect. I know that the Ministry of Education of Ukraine also is doing a lot on that track. We take care of representatives of different ethnic vulnerable groups and minorities, and Roma obviously is among them. So I do hope that things will improve, even though the war has slowed down some positive processes which could have happened otherwise, but we are nevertheless working against the odds to make sure that progress is achieved, and I'm sure that will be successful. I also would like to answer to the question of Nancy, who wrote in the chat what is the best way to help to give money or some assisting devices for the disabled, for people with impairments. I will be able to bring you in contact with proper organizations in Ukraine, but I can tell you right away that both options are workable because there are things that could be bought in Ukraine using donations, or the devices for the disabled could be also used. So, and I allow the organizers to give my contacts to Nancy, and I will be only happy if I hear from her afterwards. I have to apologize, but I hope I will be excused. Sorry, I have to leave a little bit ahead of time.
Thank you very much.
I have some people I know, Armora and others. Thank you very much for your friendly cooperation. And I hope and I'm sure that we will continue cooperating for the good of Ukrainian children and the children of the whole world, for that matter.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Daria. Now, we really ought to wind up, but I know that Marat wants to say something about his experience in Odessa region with Roma. Have we got a couple of minutes? Who's winding up, Nicola? Or?
Yes, I'll keep it very short, so it'd be interesting to hear from Marat.
Okay, Marat, please go ahead.
It's a well-known fact that Roma community is very much closed, and very often it's difficult to provide them with assistance just because of their traditions and because of their closed nature. But we do have volunteers who are Roma themselves, and they help us to connect with the Roma people in our area. We provided them with assistance in getting proper documents, because a lot of them didn't even have passports. So anyone who could be helpful or interested in our experience in that particular respect, I will be more than happy to cooperate. Please keep in touch with us.
Thank you very much, Mara. And now I think I have to say a big thank you to all our panelists. I've already thanked Daria, who's had to go. Thank you to all of you very much. And now we're going to turn to our chairman, Nicola Ramsden, who is going to wind up.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to finish by thanking our speakers for giving us your precious time in sometimes very difficult circumstances. Very grateful for the efforts you made to link to some sort of power. Your courageous work and that of other CSOs has been described very aptly as the humanitarian front in this war. You've given us very rich insight into how you're doing this in a situation where lives have been unimaginably, brutally fractured. We've learned a lot about your speed of reaction, the way you have adapted as needs change. As Irina said, each day brings new challenges. We've heard about how you're keeping in touch with the people you're helping and asking them what they need and responding quickly. And very impressively, how you are leveraging a very small number of full-time staff with the help of a huge number of committed volunteers in order to help many thousands of people. And all this is being done by civil society organizations. Very interesting, the different stages of development of the organizations we've heard from this afternoon. Some still relatively new to working with government and dealing with government bureaucracy, and relatively new to dealing with the larger international NGOs. But one thing has become very clear, I think, which is that in the sort of crucible of this very intense experience, everybody is learning very quickly. And as Anna said, we do need to think about the training and the support to sustain that. Anna also mentioned the extreme danger in which many volunteers are working, and not surprisingly, the exhaustion and the risk of burnout is something we're very well aware of. And I should just say here that the BEARR Trust's own small grant scheme was adapted last year to respond to the impact of COVID. And we actually gave some small CSOs money to help with their staff welfare. And this is something that we will be extending next year in the light of experience in Ukraine. I'd just like to very briefly mention the BEARR Trust's Ukraine appeal. As Marcia said, we've now sent £300,000 to more than 60 small CSOs in Ukraine and Moldova. And our intention is to keep going for as long as it takes. So a plea to participants today, please spread the word about the appeal. Our speakers have told us what needs are at the beginning of winter: food, warm clothing, shelter, heat, psychological support. So please let everybody know about the appeal. I think many of you are aware that we are volunteers, and 100% of what we raise goes directly in cash to local CSOs. Almost the last thing I'd like to say is just a huge thanks to Marcia and to Alexia and to Janet and Michael and Nathan for organizing this event. And the very last thing I want to say is just a final thought to leave you with, which is that a common thread, which I think was woven through what we heard today, is the idea of solidarity within the CSOs, between the organizers, between the volunteers, a sense of community. I think somebody almost said it feels like a family. And of course, that solidarity extends across borders, across international borders as well. We stand with you. Your common purpose is keeping you together. We will support you for as long as we can. We'll do our best to raise the money to send you what you need this winter. And of course, we will be keeping in touch with you. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.